watching our special coverage. Budget for Bulletproof Bharat. Can Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman deliver a budget that benefits not just the millions of Indian taxpayers but also corporate India? Well, joining us on the show this morning is a very special guest. Luxor's Managing Director Pooja Jain is here to tell us all about her expectations, if not a wish list, from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman when it comes to Budget 2026. Pooja Jain, thank you so much. Pleasure having you here with us on News 9. There's something very interesting that happened by way of GST 2.0, and while the prices of notebooks and pencils were reduced to the GST at 0%, writing instruments and pens continue to attract 18% GST, while the GST Council and not Budget would be the forum to make that correction, if at all. What are your specific expectations from Finance Minister when it comes to the writing instrument sector?
Well, thank you for asking me to come on this program. Clearly, Ms. Sitharaman has done a lot for the country in the last few years and is continuing to, including women focus of building entrepreneurship, etc.
Right.
And in the writing instruments, GST specifically, you're absolutely right. There seems to be an anomaly which the team or the committee has needs to relook at, where notebooks and only pencils are at 0%, and the rest, which is the main writing pens and markers and highlighters and whatever the office to school students use, is still at 18%, which makes limited sense from my point of view and the industry's point of view, as I speak on behalf of the industry, that without the writing instruments, a notebook cannot complement each other. And we're not only talking to the kindergarten students who actually stop writing after a particular age with pencils.
Right.
So this definitely somewhere is an anomaly which I would urge Madam's team to relook at. The other thing would be obviously the export tariffs. There is a huge opportunity for India's this part of the industry to work with US, especially looking at what their sentiment with China is. If we don't have that support from the government sooner rather than later, this opportunity could be quite big. China has developed a huge infrastructure for this industry, including large retailers like Walmart and Target and many others, who continue to buy 90% of their requirement in writing instruments and enabling industry like whiteboards and anything to do with school supplies.
Right.
And from pens, markers, it's a huge volume. Literally, there are cities made working on this category in China.
Right.
And I think that if we, as Indian industry, are ready, we are ready as infrastructure. We just need the support on the tariff part from the government, which we can then support and give strength to our customers, despite the fact that it's a larger issue where the US president and others have to decide what they will finally do.
Absolutely.
But in interim, I think the government can support. This industry is not that big. I don't think it's going to, but the long-term effect of this in the next 3 years can be huge from export point of view with the US.
Absolutely. So let's break it up into two parts. One, of course, is the demand for stationery supplies and the other is the supply. I think we are talking about the supply side strengthening by way of incentives to push India's exports. But talking about the demand side of the story, Pooja, if you remember, there has been a steady increase in the allocation for the education sector. Now, what can the Finance Ministry further do? Because again, there are two sides to it. One, of course, is the primary education, the school education, and then there is a higher education. So there has been an allocation, Education Ministry allocation of 1.28 lakh crore rupees in the last budget, of which the school education budgetary allocation was 78,000 crore rupees and higher education at 50,000 crore rupees. Overall, in your opinion, if there is a higher allocation towards the education sector as a whole, is that likely to in turn increase demand for stationery supply, including the writing instruments as well?
Absolutely, because see, in the writing instrument industry for Indian population is a huge opportunity because we have a very young population. And that young population starts from the basic coloring to simple pencils and goes to the writing pens and using it as they grow. But as the education sector is being focused, the writing instrument sector from the government is probably not a priority, which I would urge the government to look at.
Right.
We have a lot of employment connected with this because there are a lot of women in all factories involved in the packing, assembly of the manufacturing of this industry.
Right.
It's one of those industries where women workers are primarily used.
Right.
I think this could be a very important step if the government looks at it a little bit more minutely to evaluate. I've already submitted the support which is needed to the finance ministry. I'm hoping that we get a response soon
All right.
on the subject.
Okay.
But the education sector going forward and the writing instrument sector is actually complementary to each other.
Absolutely. And now let's
There-
talk about the supply side.
And there's also a large part of children coloring and art creativity, which is going to be huge in this country.
Absolutely. And sticking to children and sticking to, this growing cohort of more urban mobilization of Indians, there has been this long pending demand from the toy sector to be included in the PLI incentive scheme. We haven't really seen too much conversation on the larger stationery sector also getting PLI-like incentives. Do you think production-linked incentives is something that the finance ministry should look at for the entire ambit of stuff which is used by children and urban parents? And should a PLI-like incentive be crafted for the stationery sector as well?
And especially for the export focus.
Right.
The export focus is a big opportunity because, as I said just a minute ago, China is the largest factory for writing instruments.
Right.
Still, we have won a lot of business, but we are not even a stone in the water yet. There's a big opportunity there. As I said, there's cities made only for this industry. We need to focus on this and it will be driven. Like we have had dumping duty for import goods. We should have more focus on local manufacturing of writing instruments, which we are ready to do as companies. And technology is already there. We can give the best to the consumer, the best quality and all of that.
All right, Pooja. Well, let's pivot away from just the writing instruments industry for a moment and really talk about another large issue which is staring at India, and that happens to be making India and making Indians job ready. Do you think in that context there is also room for Budget 2026 to really double down its focus on skill development and also make India's youth AI ready, AI enabled at one end of the spectrum, and at the other end of the spectrum, should there be a greater R&D and innovation allocation to create more value addition in the Indian job market and in the Indian industry as a whole?
Yes, of course, with the youth in the country growing so fast, and now that the social media and the digital world has actually made them one, whatever's happening in the US for the youth is also happening in the minds of the Indian youth. There has to be a balance of the AI readiness in this country, but we also don't want, with a large population like ours, unemployment. We need to have a balance of that. Where we need to put AI, how we need to fix that to improve the knowledge skills of our country is something which our country has to stand up on stage for.
All right, so the country has to stand up on stage 4, but there's also this sort of critique, Pooja, and if I can ask you, as a representative of India's manufacturing ecosystem, there has been this critique of the Indian manufacturing space as well, which suggests that while the interest rate regime in India is low, the government continues to do the heavy lifting when it comes to GDP growth and what some people define as the animal spirits of corporate India to really double down on capex investments has not kept pace with the vision of the government. As a manufacturer yourself, do you agree with that critique? And what have you as Luxor done to really double down on investments to create more employment and create more manufactured output for India?
No, we as a company obviously are clearly focusing on the scale of our operations. We have been 60 years in the country, pioneered the writing industry. So definitely the focus has to be on scaling up production and thereby increasing employment, women employment as a focus, because that's what this industry drives and thrives on.
All right. So women employment has been a focus, continues to be a focus, and a pioneer for the last 6 decades. Pooja Jain, MD, Luxor, thank you so much for joining us here on News9, and thank you for all those inputs that you shared to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Well, of course, we still have just a few days to figure out how much of that will make it to the Finance Minister's speech.